I'm Frank Vaughn. It's November 27, 2025, and I'm irritated for a number of reasons. Of course, I'm irritated at the country, and we'll get to that next. I'm irritated because I'm not even supposed to be here filming this. I had other plans today, but I'm here now, and so I figure I might as well do something productive. There's been a lot of talk over the last day about Saskatchewan's actions when it comes to countering the so-called federal firearms buyback program, or whatever the hell they call this gun confiscation. And I had a friend reach out to me this morning from down south in Saskatchewan saying, I don't think this is very good. And you know what? I tend to agree. On screen is Robert Freeberg, the Saskatchewan Firearms Commissioner. This is an office that was set up under the Saskatchewan Firearms Act in 2023, an act that I celebrated on this channel as enhancing provincial autonomy and Saskatchewan taking back some power from the federal government. So now they're making amendments to the Saskatchewan Firearms Act. I'm just going to read part of the statement before I comment on it. The amendments will hold the federal government accountable for providing fair compensation to all affected Saskatchewan firearms owners. The federal government has stated that funding for its buyback program, it's confiscation, not a buyback program. I already have an issue with the wording there. They call it a buyback program, and now we're using their linguistics when really what it is a confiscation of private property from people who haven't done anything wrong. But I digress already, early going. The buyback program will be capped at $742 million, which includes the administration cost, by the way, and compensation will be offered on a first-come, first-served basis. As a result, there are no guarantees of compensation when the cap is reached. There's not only no guarantees, there's not even a fraction of the money needed to buy back these firearms at fair market values. And they published all the prices they're going to give you for your private property that they're seizing, and a lot of them are ridiculously low. The amount of money that they've set aside is barely enough to cover AR-15s alone. But continuing, first come, first served basis. As a result, there are no guarantees of compensation. By refusing to provide appropriate compensation, the federal government has created a potential incentive for firearms to be diverted from legal possession and sold illegally, which is that's just weird. It's basically saying that firearms owners who have licenses are incentivized to sell their registered guns. Some of them aren't registered. There's unregistered firearms that could be sold on the black market. But this idea that people who have behaved lawfully this entire time are now going to engage in illicit activity, it's weird. Again, it just seems to be bowing to their talking points, and we're going to get to why that's ridiculous. I was going to say another word. Starts with an R, ends with a D, but I'm trying to be nice here. Saskatchewan's amendments will remove that incentive and ensure that lawful firearms owners have the ability to obtain appropriate compensation for their lawfully owned firearms. How are they going to do this? Let me read one more paragraph. To help ensure the Saskatchewan firearms owners receive fair compensation from the federal government, the Saskatchewan Firearms Office will soon launch an online portal to provide appraisals for all firearms. So they'll appraise them at fair market value. I guess that's good. For all firearms, ammunition, and accessories that are impacted by the federal legislation. Sask firearms owners will then be able to use the appraisals as evidence in court to hold the federal government accountable for providing fair compensation to all those affected by their legislation. Court. When can anybody rely on the courts in this country? Victims can't rely on courts. The courts are, people are getting stabbed, and the stabber is getting released back onto the street the same afternoon. We got loose bail conditions all over the place. Criminals running rampant in this country. We have bad court decisions, politicized court decisions coming down from the bench all the time, and the people are just subject to this. So I wouldn't count on the courts, especially in the absence of private property rights for most in this country, which we'll get to in a minute. I said most. I've talked about how we have no property rights in this country. There is one group that does, and I'm amazed that nobody has called me out on this. Not one single person has called me out on this. Oftentimes in my work, I leave holes, and I hope somebody will drive through them, and I'm shocked that nobody has, but we'll get to that in a minute. Saskatchewan firearms owners will then be able to use the appraisals as evidence in court. The federal government accountable, blah, 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 blah. Lawful firearms owners are not jeopardizing public safety and should not be criminalized for having a firearms license or for owning legally obtained property. Very true. But here's the bit that I really don't like. The amendments will also allow the Saskatchewan Firearms Office to store firearms on behalf of Saskatchewan owners who wish to voluntarily turn in their firearms. This will ensure firearms owners do not face potential criminal charges for possessing prohibited firearms while they pursue compensation from the federal government. So the firearms, you'll voluntarily turn them in, but they're still being seized and held by the government of Saskatchewan, who will then, at some point, if fair compensation is guaranteed by Ottawa, will turn them over to Ottawa, and thus they will comply with this horrible firearms seizure. And that's what it is. It's a seizure of your property. Meanwhile, the gangbangers, the people shooting handguns on our street, the people who are shooting automatic weapons, the Khalistani separatists who are driving around with stickers all over their cars promising armed resistance, continue to get to do that. The triads, the cartels, the ethnic gangs that are running rampant all through this country, they get to continue with impunity. Meanwhile, the Saskatchewan government, as far as I'm concerned, is just not understanding where we are on the timeline. This is a government that when there was the carbon tax and there was a break that was given to certain parts of this country in an attempt to buy votes, removing it for some people and leaving it for some other people, the Saskatchewan government said, you know what? We're just going to stop paying it. We're going to stop collecting it. You're not going to get it. And that's it. Pound sand. That was an unlawful act of rebellion. And it was wonderful. And it worked. And it was just a hint of what's possible when the provinces stand up to Ottawa. But there's only one province in this country, which isn't even a part of the country, Quebec, the non-participant, the volunteer participant in Confederation. Once again, I'll just repeat myself. They don't need a referendum to leave. They can just repeal one act in their provincial legislature and they can walk out of the country, which is why they're doing all kinds of things. What are they doing? I described on this channel. We'll get back to the rest of the provinces shortly. I described on this channel how they are working on their own constitution, being a separate national entity under Canada. The media doesn't talk about it. They're focused on Alberta. They're focused on what's happening in Western Canada. They're focused on the independence movement out here, while the government of Quebec is actively building a national structure as if they haven't been building it for all of this time. They're actually building it, talking about passing their own constitution. The headline or the title of the video, which I'm not going to make you watch, is Quebec looks to pass bill that challenges Indigenous sovereignty within the province. The only people who are named with explicit title rights, in a sense property rights in our constitution, are the Indigenous. Everybody else is subject to expropriation for any reason whatsoever, as long as there's whatever the government deems appropriate compensation given to you. So the government can come along and take your quote-unquote house. They can take your firearms. They can take your computers. They can kick you off the internet, which is one of the bills that's advancing through the House right now, is that without even a court being involved, a cabinet minister can arbitrarily kick anyone off the internet they want without any process of review. You have nothing. You have nothing. Nothing is yours. You're already owning nothing in this country. You're just not happy about it. However, there are title claims that are constitutionally protected for the Indigenous. Now, I've covered on this channel how the Indian Act is a racist act. I've talked about how it's a backwards act, how it keeps people in chains. I've talked about how the bands themselves don't even own the land under their feet. The scam is that the Crown still owns everything. The Governor General still owns everything. And the Governor General is where the power lies. And that power is exploited by the Prime Minister and his cabinet, which is appointed. It's not elected. The government's appointed by the parliamentarians you elect, and who becomes the government is decided before the elections. You don't get to run in federal politics unless you're going to play ball with the insiders that fund the parties. This country is so backwards. At any rate, the point I'm trying to make is Quebec is advancing a bill, looking to pass a bill that will challenge those Indigenous sovereignty rights. Now, Quebec has also used the notwithstanding clause, which essentially allows them to suspend the charter at a whim. They've done it a dozen times. Very little curiosity or talk in the media about it. When Doug Ford, a man I don't like, I'm not getting invited to Ford Fest. He's not a friend of mine. I don't like his government. I left Ontario largely not because of Kathleen Wynne, but because of the disappointment of Doug Ford when he used the notwithstanding clause to end a strike. It was national scandal. But Quebec does it 12 times, 13 times, however many times they're up to now. It's not a problem. The media doesn't do anything. The government just keeps handing them over money, and they're looking to do similar things. So Quebec is passing a constitution. They're advancing a constitution of their own. They don't have a provincial legislature, folks. They have a national assembly. Words have power. Words have meaning. They're looking to challenge Indigenous sovereignty, which means riding over a critical component of the Constitution, one of the few things that's actually strong in the document. And again, nobody says a word. So getting back to Saskatchewan for a minute, when are we going to read the tea leaves? When are we going to read the writing on the wall? It is not time to kowtow to Ottawa and do little things. It's the same for Alberta. We have to start advancing our interests as strongly or stronger than Quebec. And we should be doing it through our houses of politics. It's better than nothing. I'll say that for the actions that the government is taking. At least you might have a chance of getting your firearms back, or you might have a chance of getting fairly compensated for them at some point. But they're still complying. They're still going to seize your firearms, and they're still going to leave your possession, and they're going to be held in legal limbo, and you're not going to be able to touch them. And it sucks. Everything that we do is framed around compliance with this federation, this system, which holds us all down. Meanwhile, Quebec is doing whatever they want. Why are we not copying the Quebec model? So why is Quebec going its own way? You could argue it's about internal politics. The CAQ, I love calling it the CAQ, the CAQ, is about to lose an election to the sovereignists, even at a time when nobody wants to leave the country. I shouldn't say nobody. Only about a third of Quebec actually wants sovereignty. 2/3 do not. And who can blame them? The amount of welfare that they extract from the country, the amount of bending over the barrel that they do to the rest of us, who would want to leave that? Who would want to divorce themselves from that relationship? But this could be internal politics. I think it's about far more than that. We now have a prime minister, very clearly, who is working on behalf of Brookfield and his stock portfolio. It seems very apparent. We're talking about a prime minister who is the head of an economy that's ostensibly worth $2.2 trillion, who has massive influence over the Canada Pension Plan, and who the people who are in the stock market, the people who can read the tea leaves, and you're going to see it in an article, know very well where things are heading, know how good this is for Brookfield. But we're going to start here. The AI bubble may be about to burst. Mark Carney must not bail out its tech titans while billionaires bet against the hyped-up multi-trillion-dollar AI market. Canada's government is doubling down. Remember that line. Well, billionaires are betting against it. Well, Canadian politicians are still caught up in their AI love affair. Panic is rippling through the industry, and the AI bubble may be about to burst with massively damaging consequences for Canada. Billionaires are bailing on AI stocks. It's not just this article talking about it. Here's Yahoo Finance. Billionaires are selling NVIDIA. What are they buying? Well, a TSX stock. What TSX stock are they buying? The likes of Stanley Druckenmiller, Ken Griffith, Israeli Englander. They're buying Brookfield Corp. Brookfield Asset Management, which just moved its headquarters down to the United States. Brookfield Asset Management that wants to get access to the American market. Brookfield Asset Management that has most of its money outside of Canada because Canada is a toxic waste dump. Nobody wants to send their money here, even the Canada Pension Plan, and we're going to talk about them, doesn't want to invest in Canada. Public sector pensions, all of these CUPE employees, all of these government employees, their pensions don't want to invest in Canada. Other people, private investors, don't want to invest in Canada. They'll invest in Canada if it benefits Brookfield. The UAE deal, remember how I talked about in this video how the media doesn't want to talk about these subjects that I'm covering? They talked about the UAE deal that Mark Carney was inking. But who does that benefit? Does it benefit Canada or does it benefit Brookfield? Again, reading the tea leaves. It's all about Brookfield. It's all about stocks. billionaires, the whales. I often say in stocks, crypto, whatever else, swimming in the wake of whales is the only way to win. You have to understand what the rich are doing, not what they're saying, what their actions spell out, and then you might have a chance of surviving. They are dumping AI stock onto retail's heads, and they're repositioning their investments into precious metals and into Brookfield Incorporated. But back to this. It details how Peter Thiel has sold. He has exited, withdrew its entire... Thiel's exit happened only a few days before Japanese giant SoftBank publicly withdrew its entire $5.83 billion investment in NVIDIA. The unwinding of the carry trade in Japan, I'm getting distracted here, but they're starting to raise their interest rates. So all that free yen that's been propping up foreign markets where Japanese can borrow money for free, and then because they have no carrying cost on those yen, going back, I think, 17 years, borrowing money for free. You can shove it in a U.S. Treasury. You can shove it in stocks. You can play games. You can go leverage anywhere else. And if you make any return at all, it's pure profit. It's been brilliant. But now Japan is raising rates. So those yen, those free yen are starting to come home. But at any rate, Peter Thiel, the billionaire founder of software firm Palantir, dumped all of his personal investments in NVIDIA. Who bought it? Retail. You did. Suckers bought it. At any rate, we scroll down, we see Mark Carney with his hands. He's looking effective. You know, he's telling his story. He's umming and ahhing through another public statement. Ottawa is doubling down instead of pulling back. At the end of September, the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board, yes, the CPPIB that I covered, very highly paid professionals, to which all working Canadians outside Quebec, and there it is, again, Quebec, the non-participant, doesn't have to deal with this. They do their own thing. Held $8 billion of NVIDIA stock as its largest single equity holding. In fact, its eight largest stock holdings were all AI stocks, a $33 billion combined value, while billionaires are dumping and buying Brookfield. And before you say they're all insiders, that might be true. But you don't have to be an insider to read the tea leaves. Mark Carney still holds a lot of interest in Brookfield. It's in a so-called blind trust. There's nothing blind about it. If you hold something, and even if you put it in a trust, your actions can single-handedly, because you have control of an entire country's finances, and there's all of these deals being signed that benefit Brookfield, you know that your stock holdings and the stock holdings of your friends are going to go up in value. And do you know who else understands that? Anybody sitting on the sideline with capital, watching events unfold. Canada has been captured by a corporate manager, an investment fund manager, a central bank manager. How many people have ran two central banks? It's a pretty short list. You can read the tea leaves, and you can make money off it. And there's a lot of people who are more than happy to make money off the burning and looting of Canada. And as for Mark Carney, you know what we're going to do? We're going to give Pierre Poilievre, or at least his team, we're actually going to give him some airtime. Check out this video they just posted.
Elbows up. Everything up.
I'm on the edge of my seat, actually. But thank you for your hospitality and above all for your leadership. You're a transformational president.
He respects strength. He respects strength. And the question is, do you appease these guys?
Never.
Like Chamberlain? Never. Exactly. You stand up.
More for you.
The Orange Man started going on, working hand in hand with the United States, Canada and the United States.
They're going to put tariffs on us. We're going to put tariffs on them. We'll match dollar to dollar. We will target those tariffs where it hurts the most in the United States.
We skipped Canada. We got the best of a series of bad deals. But you can handle them. We can handle them. We are going to handle them. We are going to handle them.
By removing all of Canada's tariffs on U.S. goods, and I have played some hockey over the years. And there is a time in a game, in a big game, and this is a big game, when you go hard in the corners, your elbows up. The time in a game where you drop the gloves in the first period and you send a message. But there's also a time in a game where you want the puck, you want a stick handle, you want to pass, you want to put the puck in the net. And we're moving later into the game, and we're at that time of the game.
President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us.
Did you apologize to Donald Trump about Ontario's anti-tariff ad?
I did apologize to the president.
Will there always be a Canada?
There will always be a Canada.
The merger of Canada and the United States.
It's ridiculous, insulting comments of the president of what we could be. I view this as a sort of Voldemort of comments.
Who cares?
I want to be a great man too.
Now, I didn't play that to carry water for the Conservative Party because I've disagreed with their messaging ever since the election when it comes to the United States, and they seem to be doubling down on the same message, which is, if you had have elected us, we would have been much tougher on Donald Trump. We would have tariffed the living hell out of him. We would have actually prosecuted the trade war. They're criticizing Mark Carney for actually, I'm not going to say he did the right thing, but he certainly lessened the suffering of the Canadian people, probably prolonging it, but not triggering. It's not like, instead of ripping the Band-Aid off all at once, Carney's ripping it off slowly. The Conservatives seem to be saying, not only will we rip the Band-Aid off fast, we're going to fight Donald Trump, and that's the message. And the message that the reason they're messaging that way is because the media and the Liberals have successfully labeled them as MAGA North. They're responding. They're defensive. Go back to the beginning of this video. That's my number one criticism of various provincial governments and the Conservative movement in general in Canada is that they're playing defense. They're not on the offense. I'm constantly told we need another 6 months. We need another 12 months. The next election will get them. We just have to be a little softer in the center. We just have to be a little bit more patient. Or the worst one is we just have to let the Liberals bury the country a little bit more, and then people will understand and finally elect us, and we'll do some kind of Nerf ball thing. We'll go halfway. We won't go whole hog. I think it would be worthwhile if the Conservative Party of Canada accepted they might not win the next election, and they just went hard, and they started fighting to create the basis of understanding for a different politics here in Canada. Like they actually fought for it and didn't care if they lost a little bit of support because they'll pick it up on the back end once people understand how they've been screwed. But I digress. What the video illustrates very well is the duplicity of Mark Carney. He rings with truth. His body language rings with truth in both of the versions that you just saw. So you can't judge him by his words. You have to judge him by his actions. And you need to understand that the billionaires in the world who judge things by actions are sending their money into Brookfield because it's a damn fine investment, as we are being managed practically in receivership by a central bank man, by a Goldman Sachs man, by Brookfield Asset Management man. I don't know how so many Canadians can't see that he is parsing out the ship as it's sinking. And the only silver lining might be that there could be a high degree of coordination between the Trump administration and Mark Carney, because you wouldn't know it from listening to his words that high degree of coordination exists. There's certainly enough coordination when it comes to Canada mimicking the Genius Act, other various things that the United States is doing, which we are set to follow suit on. We certainly jumped when they said, hey, you've got a fentanyl problem. We created a fentanyl czar. We dedicated all these resources. Not much happened besides, but we certainly made a splash. When it comes to defense, as a response to their demand that we actually pay our way in NATO and calling us out for having such a weak rainbow army, we're now going to create a multi-100,000 reserve force that's comprised of public civil servants, which is in itself a whole thing that we could unpackage. You have to interpret actions. You have to follow the money instead of listening to the words. Canada's in a bad way, and I wish the Conservative movement could wake up in Canada, not just at the federal level, but also in the provinces, Saskatchewan, Alberta. They're not our friends. They're not going to give us anything. We can't negotiate with these kind of people. We can't play to their rules. It would make sense to me if the Conservative movement decided, hey, we haven't been winning elections. 6 to 12 months isn't going to help us anymore to win because the population is so hypnotized when it comes to the Orange Man bad. So instead of focusing on winning the next election, because that focus, we're constantly told that the strategy is going to lead to results. But for 10 years, we haven't had any results. And in fact, the Conservatives many times vote with the Liberal government. It sucks. So if they said something like, we might not be able to win the next election, but we're going to fight hard. We're going to fight here. We might lose a few percentage points in the polls, but we're going to create the understanding that underlies a new political movement. We're going to tell the truth. We're going to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We're going to use our pulpit to educate the public, and we're going to fight for every new supporter. We might lose a few at the beginning, but we're going to get them back on the back end, and we might cost us another election because the current trajectory is just going to cost them an election anyway. It sucks. We're not realizing how much trouble the country's in. We're not understanding that it's not a fair system or a fair deal, particularly in Saskatchewan and Alberta, who need to step up like Quebec steps up for itself. At any rate, to finish up, I just want to say I got an email this morning from an individual, and he reported that he went to return his bottles and his deposits on his recycled goods, and he sent that as a donation. And he was telling me, or relating to me, how he's trying to set it up so that in the province that he's in, there's an account, and your credits get to that account, and then you have to request a check, but you can automatically donate it to a charity. And he's like, well, what if I could just automatically, without even having to get a check or do it manually, what if I could just automatically donate it to Frank Vaughan? And the donation itself is wonderful, and I just want to thank everybody that does. I said in a previous video that 99% won't do it, and that's fine. It's actually more like 99.9% if you really want to break down the statistics. But every one of you that watches, I appreciate your time. Your time is the most valuable thing you have, and I appreciate every single person who decides to click that donate link. But what really got me in the heartstrings, really got me in the feels, is that there's some guy out there, and there's others too, but there's some guy out there who does not have to go to that effort at all, because everything I provide is up front for free. There's no gatekeeping here. But there he is, out in the wild, going to that effort, going out of his way to try and do what he can to support this effort. And I find that really touching, and it's one of the reasons why I want to keep it the way that it is. I'm Frank Vaughan. I'll see you in the next one.